Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm Biana Mambitang. I'm Climate Tracker's Asia Manager. Plastic is all around us, but its contribution to climate change is lesser known. Today, we unpack how Climate Tracker fellows from Asia reported plastic pollution through a climate lens. But before that, I'm joined by Jed Alegado, Senior Communications Officer for the Asia Pacific of Break Free from Plastic brand audit this year. Go ahead, Jed.
Hi, thank you, Biana. Good afternoon, everyone. Our participants to this webinar from all over Asia Pacific region and also, of course, even outside of the Asia Pacific region. So last month, Break Free from Plastic and its members revealed this year's top corporate plastic polluters. A total of 440 total events in 45 countries worldwide, 11,184 total volunteers, and 330,490 items of plastic waste. We want to emphasize that their impact on our planet is not just on plastic pollution, it is also a climate issue. Why? 99% of plastic comes from fossil fuels, and plastics contribute to climate change at every stage of its life cycle. Therefore, tackling climate change also means addressing the plastic pollution crisis. While corporations continue to produce plastic, the health of the people and the planet, unfortunately, especially marginalized communities, youth, continues to deteriorate as a result. If the global plastic life cycle were in a country, it would be the fifth largest emitter of greenhouse gases in the world. Fast-moving consumer goods, or FMCGs, like this year's brand audit top corporate plastic polluters, namely Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, Unilever, which, by the way, was a major COP26 sponsor, Nestle, Procter and Gamble, Mondelez International, Philip Morris International, Danone, Mars Incorporated, and Colgate Palmolive need to tackle responsibility for the plastic pollution crisis and the climate crisis.
Thank you for that, Jed. Now we are joined by two journalists from India and Vietnam who wrote about your brand audit and its significance to their country. But before we discuss their actual reports, let's actually get to know them better. I'll start with Trang, who is also one of our researchers during our media research in plastic. Trang, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Vienna. Good evening, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chang Du. I'm a reporter from Vietnam Law newspaper, and my focus topics are on tourism, transportation, and environment. And I'm also an online fellow, joining the COP26 Journalism Fellowship for Climate Tracker this year. And yeah, plastic is the increasing issues in Vietnam in recent years, and I'm very excited for the topics that we are having today.
Thank you for that, Trang. We're also joined by Vaishnavi from India. Can you tell us something about yourself, Vaishnavi?
Hi guys, I'm Vaishnavi, and I was also one of the online COP26 fellows with Climate Tracker this year. I'm currently based out in India, and I live in New Delhi. I work with an online magazine called The Bastion, where we track India's development journey. And we do this by reporting on health, environment, sports, tech, and education. I take lead on environment, and I've been doing this for the past 2.5 years. And I cover environment broadly, so I look at stories of environmental justice, environmental democracy, climate change, urban ecology, renewable energy, things like that. And thank you for having me here as well. I'm also excited to talk about the stories that we did, especially the one on plastic for the COP fellowship. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that. I want to actually begin with you. Can you take us through your story? How is plastic waste affecting New Delhi?
Yeah, no, I will definitely take you through the story. And also, I think I also take you through why I took and I picked up the angle that I did. So just days short of COP26, I and my fellows here, we were attending the press conference that was with Break Free from Plastic, and they had launched the 2020 brand audit report, and it recognized the top global plastic polluters of the world. And after that, a couple of days later, COP26 began, and there were a few sessions also on the roles that businesses should take to drive climate action. And there were very interesting panel discussions that were happening at COP. But as I was listening to these discussions, I also was thinking of how should I write the story on plastic. And I found myself thinking about how large negotiations like COP or decisions that bigger corporations make about plastic, how does all of that impact someone on the ground? And living in Delhi, I think the very straight, clear example that came to my head was this landfill that's called Bhalswa. And it's one of the three waste dumping sites in Delhi. It's huge. And what you see on the screen is a documentary that the Bastion had produced, which is where I work, in 2019. And these are the glimpses that you see of the kind of plastic that is available there. And this is the landfill that is there from the top. And just to give you a little visual sight of what it looks like. So I found myself thinking about people like what you see on the screen, that when bigger corporations, negotiations, international negotiations talk about these things, how does it impact someone on the ground? And with that, I decided I wanted to do this story from an environmental justice point of view, to look at questions of who is polluting and who is getting impacted by that pollution, right? So in this case at Bhalswa, who are the people who are sort of working here? How do they get impacted by this plastic in both negative but also productive ways, right? So those were the sort of questions I started to think about, wanted to answer. And I spoke with two people who work there, Fiza and Salim, about their lives around plastic. And then with that, other experts who have worked in this area and with communities like Fiza and Salim who work there, to understand what is the measures at hand that we currently have to deal with this sort of plastic that is available here.
Yeah, I'd like to actually bring in Jed to ask more
Um,
questions to
yeah,
Vaishnavi. Jed, go
yeah.
ahead.
Thank you for that, Vaishnavi. Um, you did mention something about the environmental justice angle. Can you tell us more about the lives of people leaving the landfill?
Sure, thanks, Jed. I think it's important to look at this with the many layers that they are. So, for instance, when I spoke to the residents for the story who live in Bhalswa, they talked about how they don't have a direct source of water for drinking here. So there's a lake right next to Bhalswa, but it is so polluted that you can't really use it for any purpose. Forget drinking, but not for other purposes as well. And then there are also studies that have been done, scientific studies around Bhalswa, that sort of confirm the kind of pollutants that are there in the water and also the land. Apart from that, there are also, when I spoke with experts for the story, they spoke about, plastic waste specifically. So also impacts people here. Think of things like microplastics that sort of leach into the water sources and pollute it. And also polyester, which is so commonly found in the landfill. It's a material that is extremely difficult to recycle. And if there's a fire, polyester really sort of acts like a fuel, and it blows that fire up. And Bhalswa, by the way, has had many instances of such fires in the past. So you can only imagine that when all of this unsegregated waste, including plastic, is on fire, the amount of toxic pollutants that it would release, and the people there who would breathe all of that plastic and all of those toxic materials coming out of that burnt plastic. And there's also other problems with plastic, wherein larger pieces of plastic that cannot be compacted act as a very unstable ground to work on. And because of that, there have been cases in the past where parts of the landfill have fallen onto shanties and smaller houses and settlements close to that area. It's sometimes causing loss of lives, but also always causing loss to the property of people. So there are all of these problems that are there. But having said that, I think it's also important to look at the fact that this is also a livelihood for many. So, for example, Fiza and Salim, who I spoke with, they lived close to the landfill, but they also went to the landfill every day to collect some of this material and sell it off to a couple of buyers. Materials such as plastic pouches of milk or metal, cloth, things like that, all of which have a rate in the market. So it's as much as 10 to 15 rupees a kg, depending on what material you're collecting. So with that, it is a source of livelihood also for people. And I think it's important when we're talking about waste, we're talking about plastic production, talking about landfill management. At the same time, it's important to also talk about how these livelihoods would be affected and what can be done to sort of help in a just transition for these livelihoods as well, which is the kind of conversations we have in other sectors, right? Like for coal and things like that. And I think it's important to talk about that here as well, because like Jade said, what do their lives look like? It's complex. They're impacted by this negatively, but this is also a source of livelihood.
Yeah, and in your article, you actually also mentioned the group Pick My Trash. Can you tell us more about what they're doing and how they're actually helping the community?
Right. So Pick My Trash is a part of a larger NGO called Chintan, and I spoke with their founder. Her name is Bharti Chaturvedi. And they also sort of work on the same point that I was talking about, which is that, what Bharti said, I think it sort of summarizes it really well. She said that you have to look at plastic as a material, but also as a livelihood. And in order to sort of connect these two, they have one of these initiatives that Chintan works with is called Pick My Trash. And what they do is that they're connected with Delhi's many waste pickers, such as say Fiza and Salim. And there's a number that you can call on to, and you can say, hey, listen, I have all of this trash at home, which I don't know what to do with. It could be paper, it could be e-waste. That's something we still haven't found a way to deal with. And they come to your home and they pick up this from your home. So it's sort of like a door-to-door collection. And then they take it, reuse, recycle it, find ways to do that. So it's sort of targeting two problems. You're dealing with the plastic problem, the waste problem, but the livelihood aspect of it is also there. So that's one of the things that Chintan does through Pick My Trash. And I think while I was speaking with Bharti, I was speaking with other experts who, when we were talking about solutions to plastic, and this sort of made me realize that when you're looking at solutions, you can't think of a one solution for all of the problems that plastic is. It's important to look at the various stages in its life cycle, and who is using that plastic at which times and in what ways, and then look for interventions at each of those stages. So yeah, I just wanted to add that apart from telling you about the Pick My Trash initiative.
Yeah, and having said that, we actually have another question coming in from our audience, and this is something that's actually directed to you, Jed, before we move on to another issue. Raul Norbe, when you were flashing it on your screen, he asked us collecting and upcycling plastic waste is a remedy to break free from plastic.
Mhm. Yeah, well, for us, the breakthrough from plastic movement, of course, collecting and upcycling waste, it's a stopgap measure to solve the plastic pollution crisis. There's a really a more sustainable, ecological, and long-term solution to the plastic pollution crisis, which is really to stop plastic production in the first place, right? Because by investing in cleanups, in collecting and upcycling, or even downcycling plastic waste into different forms and materials. The activities do not directly address the root causes of the problem, right? We're just trying to delay the the implementation of the real solution, which is to invest in more reusable, refillable systems, which are alternative delivery systems of products, which really need packaging, right, in the first place. Yeah. So for us, it's a stopgap measure, but it doesn't address the real cause of the crisis.
Yeah, and having said that, Vaishnavi, how is your government actually addressing this issue?
See, plastic is a prevalent issue as a problem. It's there, and there have been a lot of policies, rules in place, decisions around plastic. So I remember in 2019, I think there was this whole talk about completely banning single-use plastic in India. But because of the sort of multiple layers that there are in that I was speaking of earlier, these interventions are things like banning something completely is slightly, it's easier said than done. But apart from that, there are policies that tackle and look at and rules that sort of look at plastics specifically. So there's plastic waste management rules that came around in 2016, which had a very clear component of extended producer responsibility as well. So it did place some amount of responsibility on those who are producing the plastic. So it required, as per the rules, it required the brand owners, amongst a lot of other things, to submit a plan of how they're collecting the plastic waste that they're generating due to their operation and due to the products. But as it happens, usually the question is how well these rules are working on ground, right? And as a journalist, I haven't done an in-depth audit or an in-depth sort of research to see how well these guidelines or spaces that talk about EPR, etc., are doing. But I did speak to someone who works on some of these issues for the story. Her name is Sonakshi, and she mentioned that there are very, very few companies who, as of today, have actually submitted these plans to the authorities that they're supposed to. Right, so that question of how well all of these rules actually get implemented is always there. Apart from that, what is also encouraging to see is that now a lot of private companies, corporations, they are now looking to commit strongly to their ESG goals, which is the environment, the social and governance goals that they have, and commitments that they have. For instance, someone that I spoke to for the story was someone from Godrej and Boyce, which is a leading manufacturing industry that also deals with a lot of appliances, which means that they will have a lot of plastic packaging along with their products as well. Now they have made very strong commitments, not only to recycle, but more than that, to look for alternate substitutes that can do the work of plastic. So that is also happening. It's encouraging to see that. But of course, as journalists, I think it's also important to keep in mind that there's also greenwashing that exists. And we should also train ourselves to be able to pick on that when that happens, when we do see some greenwashing happening. So in all aspects, yes, Biena, there are some rules, and not only from the government, but from private sectors also, that we are seeing now.
Yeah, thanks for that, Vaishnavi. I want to bring in actually Trang from Vietnam to also join our discussion. So Trang, is the things that are the things happening in India the same for your country? Are you seeing more laws being implemented to reduce plastic waste?
Thank you, Vienna. And I mean, after Vaishnavi shared about the situation in India, I think I can relate a lot because, well, I mean, the same problem is also having is also like happening in Vietnam. Like for example, the livelihoods of people living near the landfills is this tension is the topics that was like that was like very serious in Vietnam during recent years, and the tension comes from like no one like in the situation like the citizens or the governments or the corporations, no organization or no one's want to pay for the for the management of landfills or for the waste management, because we don't know where those waste come from, so nobody is taking responsibility for that. So I think I can relate to the stories from Vaishnavi, but it is actually not my topics that I'm working on for my articles. Like when I was doing my article, I actually looked in a bigger picture of the waste management, the plastic waste management in Vietnam, and I found a recent report by the World Bank that in a year we actually released nearly 4 million tons of plastic, and only 33% of that were collected for recycling, and the lost value of the material the lost value of material waste are estimated up to 2.9 billion USD per year. And another survey by Worldwide Fund in Vietnam also show that business sectors generates the most plastic waste compared to other sector like households. And actually the big companies are releasing more plastic waste than the medium-sized and small-sized companies, but we don't have any statistics to show like how much the medium and small-sized companies are releasing the plastic waste onto the environment. And and when I was like studying the report from Break Free from Plastic, and it also mentioned that Coca-Cola and other big companies, big corporations in the world are also the top polluter, and they are also releasing like a large amount of plastic waste, and they don't show like even they having the promise and to reduce the amount of plastic waste, but actually the report shows that the plastic pollution is more serious year by year. and and I think that is a problem that's also happened in Vietnam. And for the implementations by the governments. When I was doing the media research with Climate Tracker earlier this year, I also found that like since 2019, the government has launched a nationwide movement against plastic waste, and the movement also includes the increase of classifying, collecting, reusing, and recycling of plastic waste, especially single-use plastic. And in that movement, the governments and organizations and corporations should issue plans to reduce the use of plastic and especially, of course, single-use plastic. Uh, but um, but it is voluntary, and we don't know like even companies and governments, they show on the media that they have like they have transitioned to the green orientation, like using more recycle cups and recycle straw instead of plastic products. But I mean, we don't have any trackers to actually track like they still doing it right now. So that is the problem. That is the problem because there's a lot of profits, and maybe they also show the commitments and efforts on the media, but actually we don't know like they are really doing it. But the report showed that the plastic problem is actually more serious. So So I think in Vietnam we have actually started a national movement against the plastic waste since 2019, and we also implementing a new environmental protection law, and which will take effect on 2022. But there's still a lot of challenges and a lot of questions to be issued and to be like answered to address the plastic problem in Vietnam.
Yeah. Thank you, Rang. Of course, uh, both of you talk about the role of corporations in the growing plastic pollution crisis in Asia, right? Did you find any silver lining from COP26 that you think will address this issue? Maybe let's start with Vaishnavi and then Rang.
Thanks, Jade. I think plastic as an issue doesn't really get covered as much in COP26 as do other issues. Um, and whether it should or it shouldn't is maybe a conversation for a later time. But what I found was interesting was a couple of these panels that were there that talked about um, responsible business, right? So, what are the kind of tools that businesses would need to become responsible for climate action? What are the roles they can play? What resources also they will need? And also, very interestingly, they talked about involving investors as well into this talk, not just business people. So, asking investors as a group to talk to the businesses they were investing in to see if they are complying with and aligning their strategies, their business strategies with the Paris Agreement. So these were what I thought were sort of the silver linings, that there are conversations that are happening around this, because like the report also says, the break free from plastic reports, it very clearly puts the onus on corporations, bigger companies, to take the responsibility of a lot of plastic generation there is. So if we can move this conversation towards business doing responsible work, I think that would be a good time for this to happen. So for me, that was the silver lining there.
How about you, Chang?
Okay, so I think for Vietnam, I think it's important to address that in Vietnam's NDC, the government addresses the measure to achieve GHG the reduction in 5 different sectors, and there is a separate provision for waste in general that says we should take measures to manage, develop and apply technology for treatment of domestic solid waste, ordinary industrial solid waste, and special solid waste to limit GHG emissions. And also, I want to bring in the commitment made by the Prime Minister that Vietnam will achieve the net zero by 2050. So we are actually having we are also having a national plan to reduce the plastic waste coming into the ocean by 2025, and that is we want to reduce like 50% of the plastic waste coming into the ocean. But I think again that is a lot of promises coming from the governments and coming from the policymakers. But there are some issue like current issues that we should address, like for example, we don't have any mechanisms to incentivize corporations or the consumers to trend towards the green, the green trend, or like the plastic alternative products, because we don't have any policies like to the plastic alternative products are have no advantage compared to plastic to plastic products. So in the in the supermarkets, they still giving away the plastic bags because they are more convenient, and even they use even they change uh, to the paper, paper bag. I mean, there is no I mean, there's no difference for them, and even the companies have to pay more for that, and even the consumer have to pay more for that, and so people are not happy with the transition when they have to pay more, and they don't understand. I mean, if their changing behavior can really affect the environment, or it's just like a small effort. So I think we don't have any like markets for plastic alternative products, so it is really hard to make that transition, even though we're having a lot. I mean, I think that is a big gap between like the promises from the policymakers and the real situation in Vietnam. And also I want to also address the problem that I think it's also happened in the world, that is the greenwashing problem. So going green is also framed as a good and profitable business in Vietnam, like like if like a companies say that we are going to be more sustainable, we reduce more plastic in our process, and they will having like more uh, credits well in the society. But it's also a trap, because like for example, when people say paper cup is better than plastic cup, but when we look into the life cycle of paper cup, we can also see that the process of producing paper cup also include like tree cuttings, like the transportation still require fossil fuels, and even like in many paper cups, they are still coated with a layer of plastic inside the cup for the waterproof purpose. So it is well, I I. I think it is the problem that's like for a long time Vietnam has, especially in Vietnamese media, they are they are not mentioning like the increasing issues, as well as like drawing the connection between plastic pollution and climate change. So after COP26, I think I mean and after all those commitments made by the prime minister, I think it is the plastic pollution is an urgent issue that many people are interested.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jang. I think all of us are hopeful that the plastic issue will actually be one of the forefronts and center stage in battling climate change. But one of our fellows here, Anthony, was actually able to join us in COP through in Glasgow to report on COP26. Before we talk about that, can you tell us more about yourself first? Hi,
Yeah,
Anthony.
thank you. Hi, Vienna. Thank you. It's really nice to see you again after that
Yeah.
overwhelming 2 weeks in Glasgow. I mean, there's so many things to talk about COP26, but there are like a sentence that I always say when I talk about COP. It is tiring, but quite rewarding, because there's really none other like being there in as you can see some of those photos there, meeting different people from all over the world. They could be researchers, they could be politicians from all around the world, and it was just so enriching to hear different perspectives, and especially me as someone who covers one of which is the environment in Indonesia. I get perspectives. The problem that is being tackled in Indonesia is also similar elsewhere, which is quite interesting to say the least.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. Like to say this, that those 2 weeks we had in Scotland was overwhelming is
Yeah.
really an understatement. Like there's so many things that happened to us. But can you tell us more about? Can you tell us more about your experience, specifically when you actually went in there and went into the rallies? What did you actually? Can you tell us what you saw?
Right. Thank you. So rallies is like a very usual thing in COP26, and I was told by my senior journalist that it always happened every COP, and but this time around I get to witness it directly, so that's why it is it's particularly remarkable for me. For me, when I saw the protest. And I think one thing that is very interesting about the protest is that people have different things they want to raise up. Like some are talking about plastics, some are talking about coal, some are talking about completely different issues on politics, social, and even race issues at times. And it was very interesting how, despite those different approaches, different issues, people gather and they want to voice out and they want to be a part of that big community that tries to make a change through
Yeah, but I guess you have to agree with me that one of the highlights of our trip to Glasgow was really meeting Nina. Can you introduce Nina to our audience?
of course, the 14-year-old Indonesian who wants to be president. I mean, how is that not remarkable? There you go. You can see the pictures nice and clear. Um, I think one thing that was very remarkable is that she looks like any regular teenager from Indonesia, but when she speaks, my God, she sounds very articulate. She sounds like she's a 20-year-old, and I'm the one that inexperienced in that interview. She was really, really well spoken. And I think what stands out as well is that despite being such a young age, she also has this kind of drive to really not only voice out the problem that is happening in her hometown in Java, but also he wants other people. She wants other people to join as well. And I think one quote that really stood out to me is that. So a little background. Uh, she draws inspiration from Greta Thunberg, as we all know, and Greta Thunberg itself is attributed to her name. What that means is that sometimes Nina is called the Indonesian Greta, right? And then I asked, like, how do you feel, being called such a nickname? And he said he's really inspired. He's really she is really honored about this. And if Greta can do it, I can do it too. And I think another quote that really stood out to me is that she said that she wants all children to know that that children have the right to live in a safe, clean, and healthy environment. So children have to be brave to speak up. And I think that is a very point about Nina that she wants to let out to the world.
Yeah, we
Thank you,
actually
Anthony. So, yeah, yes, go ahead, Bian.
go ahead, Jen.
Yeah.
But
So, yeah, aside from
we actually learned about Ed. They were actually the ones who introduced the group to us. So go ahead, Jed. Sorry about that.
so aside from those, Anthony, what have you learned from from interviewing Nina? Yeah. I think I saw a lot of stories and articles published even from Western media about Nina's story, and I really really was happy that she made it to the COP, and yeah, she became like an instant really the face of climate and plastic activism in Asia. That we're here in Asia, we also have our own young activists doing their share for the planet.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Jed. So I think the biggest thing I learned from Nina is that the waste problem, the plastic problem, but in this case is the waste import or the plastic import problem, the plastic waste import problem, really sort of affects, like it can affect anyone, and it can affect especially disadvantaged communities. In this case, developing countries, developing economies, and maybe smaller cities who receives all this global plastic waste, and in turn, the communities nearby would get affected. And I think one of the most memorable one was when she said she told the story about how plastic waste, first of all, it's put inside this paper box. So these paper, right, this paper waste is being imported for paper mills, paper factories nearby, right? But in order for these imports to get through the security check, imagine from the outside, it's like a box, right? It's made of paper, and it just looks like paper waste that is, in a form of a box. But then inside it, these are plastic waste, and that's how they bypass security check. And then once they send all those paper waste to the factory or to the paper mills, then the plastic waste will be dumped at a nearby village, and one of which is Nina's area or Nina's neighborhood. And the communities there would recycle the waste. So those plastics, they will sort them out and see which one can be recycled, which one cannot be recycled. Those that can be recycled are then being sent to a factory, which will then be plastic pellets and be exported to China. Now, those plastics, they are not recyclable, right? They are used to produce tofu, right? Right, like tofu factories, the food, right? And turns out, so Nina and her father, which is also a scientist that is very, very vocal in this waste import problem, found that by using these plastic to produce tofu, the tofu contained dioxins, which is like a very harmful substance that can really, really be harmful to the human health when they consume these tofu. But not only tofu, we also talk about eggs. How? Because the ashes that comes from burning plastics, they go to the ground, and then these chickens, these local chickens, would eat from the ground where the burned plastics are. And as a result, the eggs that chicken produce contains also dioxins, unsafe level of dioxins. So not only the tofu are poisonous, but the eggs are poisonous. And you can see how like a global waste problem can go as big as sea pollution or just plastic waste, but it can also be really small to the community level where these communities are affected to up to their food, right, as I was telling you about. And not only that, but those plastics that are recycled, and I think one of the attendees mentioned it as well, is that you have to cut it into small pieces, and then you have to wash it, right? You have to wash these plastics, and the nearby communities do this by using the river water. So the wastewater from the recycling process is actually polluting the river. So not only the food, the tofu, the eggs, but also the river is polluted. So the waste import problems can really affect these communities. And I think that's the biggest thing that I learned from Nina's story.
But you actually, aside from Nina's story, you actually wrote a full blown research on your news agency Tirto about plastic in Indonesia. What did you find out?
Oh, I found a lot of things. Thank you for that. Yeah, I found a lot of things. So first of all, I found that imports has gradually increased. Waste imports, plastic, papers, and others. But I specifically researched on plastic and paper, and found out that that's for plastics, especially, it really started to rise from 2010, and it really peaked at 2018. So a quick important context here is that 2018, China regulation where they don't accept these waste anymore, and as a result, developing countries like Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia would then receive this waste that China refused. And this is why, I mean, there's a correlation. It's not necessarily a causation, but it's a correlation that by having China refusing the waste from the world, other countries get the leftovers, right? Now, other than that, we also found that those that exports waste, plastic waste, to be exact, to Indonesia, right, are rich countries. Are developed countries. Like we found that, like the Netherlands, Germany, Slovenia, and the US was the four exporters to Indonesia in terms of plastic waste. And I think that just voices out again that, like, these plastic waste import problem is disproportionate to poorer countries, to developing countries, and there's if we're talking about climate justice, and this is of course unfair, right? And we were talking about recycling just now, and a report from Gaia, which is long for Global Alliance for Incinerators Alternatives, found that actually only 9% of plastic they produce in the world since 1950 has been recycled, right? So instead of recycling themselves, so they send these plastics to developing countries, and those are the few important findings. And I mean, there are other important findings. For example, the government is actually currently working on implementing this joint decree where they would reduce the quota for waste import, and they would also impose tolerance for how much can a waste be contaminated when they get imported. So let's say for plastics and papers, it's 2%. So that means if there are over 2% of materials that are outside of paper and plastics that are being contaminated in those important waste, you cannot import them. So these are a few very important policies that will at least try to handle parts of the import waste problem. But of course, we will be waiting for the implementation, right? And one of which Nina's father told me that it's a great move, but you will have to allow CSOs to really monitor the implementation, because the thing with Indonesia is that a lot of policies are being made, but when they are being implemented to the ground, sometimes things don't go as expected, right? And I think that's the last finding about the government policies. And yeah, you can read it on tirto.id, which is an Indonesian online media, and it's called let me see the title. It's called Waste Import Between Industrial Use and Environmental Degradation. So one last thing, if I may, Biana, do we have time to add one more
Go
thing?
ahead.
Okay, thank you. One more thing, I think that's very important, is that Indonesia actually needs import waste. And I think that's a very important finding from us. A lot of the recycling industries still depend on import waste because they either cannot find waste which has good quality enough for industrial use because they are sorted, right? Or it's just more expensive domestically, so they sort of import the waste from outside because it's cheaper and it's more accessible. And what that means is that if we cut down the waste import directly, that it will impact a lot of industries, and a lot of industries will be standing still, right? Because they don't have the raw materials to have their recycling industry going on. So I think the dilemma between stopping waste import and continuing industrial use of the import waste is a very interesting and a very tricky matter that we all in Indonesia have to find a solution going forward. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Anthony. We are actually down to our last fellow, Nietzsche from Thailand, and she actually talked about the waste to energy project in her country. But before that, can you tell us about yourself first, Nietzsche?
Hi, thanks for having me. I've been enjoying all the conversations before. And I'm Nisha. I'm working for Green News. It's an online news agency under Thai Society of Environmental Journalists. And we report on wide ranges of environmental issues.
Yeah, can you tell us about the story you just wrote for Green News and Climate Tracker on waste to energy project?
Okay, so I'm doing this story about Nabon people. They are the local community in the south of Thailand, and this community is surrounded by mountains, and there's also like the river and the creeks run in the middle of the villages. And so these people, they just realized this year that there's going to be new waste to energy plants built next to their home. And so even though we have COVID right now, but they travel to Bangkok for a week to protest it against all the relevant agencies that they don't want this power plant next to their home. And they're just not the only one communities that you found in Thailand. And there's like more than 40 waste to energy plants currently building in Thailand. Many of them already finished, and many more are upcoming. And you see that there's a lot of communities that got affected by the waste to energy plant, because they say that there will be air pollution or the water contamination. And so I first I thought to myself that, okay, I'm gonna find some plastic story angle to tell about in COP26. And so I joined this People Summit, which is like the side event that the CSO and the people or the activists organized by themselves beside the official COP26 event. And I listened to a Philippine representative from Noburn, Philippines, where so he's a lawyer, and he talked about the very similar situation in Philippines. And then I realized that something like this doesn't happen just only in Thailand, but also like all the neighboring countries like the Philippines, and also I bet that in Vietnam or also India and Indonesia also. So I explore that. I have been reporting several times on the movement that people protest against the waste to energy, but I haven't like seen the clear picture, like how all these cases are linked to the bigger picture of power development plan or the plastic waste management agenda, or even like the global agenda, like the climate event. So I try to draw the connection between all the cases with the bigger picture.
When we actually talked about your story, when Jed and I were actually talking about your story, he flagged me about greenwashing in Thailand's waste to energy program. Can you tell us more about that, Jed? So we can ask Nisha about her story.
Yeah, of course. More often than not, waste to energy incineration programs. These have been peddled as a clean type of clean energy, which uh, contributes to solving the plastic pollution crisis, problems on waste in general. But at the same time, because of the push for renewable energy, and especially as a climate mitigation program, um, the WTE, or waste to energy incineration projects, have also been pushed, especially in Asia, as to solve the climate crisis. So yeah, that's why I'd like to ask Nisha on how did yeah, the pledges in Glasgow affected waste to energy programs in Thailand or in any other ASEAN neighboring countries.
So like the case that I brought up at the beginning of the story about Nabon people, the power plant that is going to build next to the community, the name of the project is Clean Energy, Clean Power Plant. So the waste to energy program has been protested as clean energy, like in Thailand, and also like it's like killing a bird with two stones, killing two birds with one stone only, because they protest that it's a win-win program, that you can reduce plastic waste at the same time as gain electricity from renewable energies. So when you mention about greenwashing, it's mostly about the campaigns rarely by the government itself and also the companies, that waste to energy program is a very good opportunity that, and they mainly talk about the positive sides of them, especially that because right now the global trend is shifting toward to renewable energies uh, from using coal and other fossil fuels. They want to transit to more renewable energies, which they consider as using household waste as one of them, which is argued by many CSO like the Gaia that Anthony mentioned before, that they realize that actually the plastic waste that used as food, they are also considered as fossil fuel because it's made from the same thing anyway. So greenwashing happening with the waste to energy is mainly about that they want to talk about only the positive side of them to the local community themselves and also to the general public. And especially in the local community, when they don't have enough knowledge or understanding toward the issues, they just feel that it's okay with the program itself. Like the Nabon people, the power plant that they're gonna build, they barely talk about the household waste that they're gonna use as the fuel in the power plant. They mainly talk about biomass because they say that they can help the locals by buying all the agricultural byproduct from them. And actually, like, because some of the locals don't know about the negative side of waste to energy, so they don't protest against it. Some people just go along with them, and it's become like a rubber stamp for the project to get passed easily, like because they have to do all the steps to construct the project, like environmental impact assessment. If the community is not knowledge enough about the negative side of the issue, they can just go to the public hearing and raise their hand that they support the programs. So something like this happened a lot in Thailand and also the neighboring countries.
Yeah, thanks for that, Nisha. Right now, I want to, since we're down to our last minutes, I want to invite other fellows to the stage. And as we go back to the title of this event, reporting on plastics through a climate lens. After all our discussion, what do you think journalists in Asia can do better to report on plastic pollution through a climate lens? I'll start with Anthony.
Right. Yeah, thank you. I think one thing that reporters, I guess, in Asia can do more is really integrating data with their reporting, like not only using qualitative data through interviews, but also look at the numbers, because these really tells the reality of things. And right now, I see, while there has been efforts to integrate data journalism into climate stories, it's still mainly, especially where I'm from, he said, she said article, and also, of course, literature review. But yeah, that's what I want to see more in Asia: data journalism.
Thanks for that, Anthony. And it's something actually you're doing in Tirto right now, right? You're
Yes, that's right.
incorporating data journalism in your environmental stories. How about you, Nisha? What have you learned from this experience?
I realized that uh, there's a very few coverage on climate change in my country, but I want to encourage other journalists to do so more and not just translating the coverages from the Western media only, because you are able to cover climate change as well. It's not too big, and you can also link the local issues that happening in your country with the big global event as well.
Yeah, that's actually something that we're pushing in Climate Tracker. That's why we are shameless plug. We actually recently launched a website to help journalists contextualize their stories. We launched climatetracker.asia to help journalists to write their stories in a climate lens. And one of the things that we actually put in there is a research made under BFFP with Drang, and we actually did a media research just recently on plastic. Trang, you've been like a climate tracker fellow for like 3 times, right? Or 4 times right now. Well, what can you say about reporting on climate and reporting on plastic pollution?
Well, it is a long journey. It is a long journey for me with climate trackers in last year, and I have like three experiences like in a row, and it was like it was a lot. I mean, during 1 year for me when I was doing the reporting on climate and especially the plastics problem. And like in my opinion, like when we report about plastic, we should question more about the common sense. Like plastic cups should be replaced by paper cups or something like that. It will be more green, or electric cars is better than fossil fuel car. I think it is important to question all those common sense, and we can look into the data, like Anthony said, and or we can look into a bigger life cycle of the products to see if it is actually green, if it really solve the problem of climate change, or they solve the plastic pollution problems. So yeah, I I think it is a very a year, like a tough year for me to work with climate tracker, like in a lot of like a lot of serious and tough issues. But we should always look more like opportunities like this to expand our knowledge and our chances in our reporting expertise. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that, Vaishnavi. You've also been like a former climate tracker fellow, and I think from all of you, like you've been reporting on plastic waste like from before already. So can you tell our audience some advice on how you can actually report on plastic pollution better? And do you have any advice for them to kind of improve their reporting on like general climate issues?
I think apart from all the points that my fellow panelists said, all of them were super important. And just to add on to that, I think it's important to keep looking at the environmental justice angle of things, and ensure that our stories have a variety of voices coming in, especially from minorities and gender. That's something that we should take account of. And apart from that, I think as much as absolutely data is so important to support our stories, but also qualitative data, right, which Anthony sort of talked about a little bit. I think as a young journalist, it's extremely important to just get out there to where the story is, and go there, see things, talk to people there, and then of course find other quantitative data to support what we saw and what we observed. So yeah, I think those would be my 2 points of advice, to see what different voices you can bring in and get out there to the site.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks guys. It's been like a lovely journey for everyone. I know everything happened like in a breeze. Like normally Climate Tracker Fellowship runs through like 3 months to 4 months. This fellowship only run for like 2 months. We had to like cram everything, but I'm very thankful. I kind of like somehow melancholic because I know I have to say goodbye to the four of you already. Like we've been really like a tight knit group because we are the only Asians in the COP26 fellowship. But yeah, I'm very grateful to have worked with you, and thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon as we tackle how journalists can report on the plastic pollution through a climate lens. If you want to read Nisha, Trang, Vaishnavi, and Anthony's stories, they're all available on our website climatetracker.org or climatetracker.asia. And we'd also like to thank Break Free from Plastic for making this event possible.
Yeah. So again, Vienna and Climate Tracker especially the Asia fellows. Thank you for another collaboration again. Stay tuned to Breakthrough from Plastic's upcoming activities. For January 2022, we have the virtual toxic tour. This is a mapping and storytelling project designed to bring visibility to environmental justice and frontline groups and communities. We want the stories to bring them to journalists and other key storytellers, and bring attention to the human upstream impact of plastic pollution. So stay tuned for that highly important narrative project in January 2022. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Visit our website, www.breakthroughfromplastic.org. And again, thank you, and see you all next time.
Thanks, everyone. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thanks
Thank you
for
so
you.
much.
Thank you.